My name is Sam. Listen carefully to my story. Do not miss any part, because this story is very special. It is about my struggle, my fear, my tears, and how I turned my weakness into my strength. It will touch your heart, make you feel strong, and in the end, you will understand something beautiful about life. When I was in school, I was weak in English. I struggled to read. I stumbled when I spoke, and I made many mistakes in writing. Every time the teacher asked me to read aloud, my hands would shake. My voice would become soft and my face would turn red. The whole class would laugh at me. Remember one day my teacher asked me to read a paragraph. My hands were sweating. I stood up, holding the book. I tried to read, but my words were broken. I mispronounced simple words. I could hear the sound of giggles in the class. My eyes filled with tears, but I did not let them fall. After class, some boys came to me. One of them said, "Hey Sam, do you even know how to speak? You sound funny." The others laughed. My heart broke into pieces. I wanted to run away. I wanted to hide somewhere where no one could see me. I went home and sat in my room. I stared at my books. I wanted to tear them apart. I thought, why am I so weak? Why can't I speak like others? I felt small. I felt stupid. I wanted to give up. That night my mother came into my room. She sat beside me and saw the tears in my eyes. She gently placed her hand on my head and said, "Sam, what is wrong?" I could not hold it in anymore. I hugged her tightly and cried, "Mom, I hate myself. I'm so bad at English, everyone laughs at me." She held my face in her hands and looked into my eyes. "Sam, listen to me. Do not cry because you are weak. If you are weak, it means you have a chance to become strong. No one is born perfect. We learn. We grow. And you will too." Her words stayed in my heart. That night, I made a decision. I decided that I would not let my weakness defeat me. The next morning I woke up early. I stood in front of the mirror and started speaking in English. My words were slow and shaky, but I did not stop. I read storybooks, I listened to English songs, and I watched movies with subtitles. I still made mistakes, I still mispronounced words, but I kept going. One day, my teacher gave us a project. We had to prepare a speech in English and present it in front of the whole class. My hands felt cold, my throat felt dry. My old fear returned. That night I practiced again and again. I stood in front of the mirror. I spoke to myself. When I forgot a word, I started again. When I stammered, I took a deep breath and continued. The day of the presentation came. My heart was beating fast, my hands were shaking, but I remembered my mother's words. "You have a chance to become strong." I took a deep breath and walked to the front of the class. I looked at everyone. For a moment I was scared. But then I thought of all the nights I practiced. I thought of my tears, my pain, my struggle. And I started speaking. My voice was not perfect. I still made small mistakes. But I did not stop. I kept going. When I finished, the class was silent for a moment. And then suddenly they started clapping. My teacher smiled at me and said, "Sam, I am proud of you." At that moment, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt strong. I felt brave. I felt proud of myself. That day, I learned something important. Weakness is not a curse. It is a chance to grow. I did not stop there. I kept working on my English every day. I read books. I wrote small essays. And I practiced speaking with my friends. Slowly, my words became clearer. My confidence grew. 1 year later, I stood on the school stage in front of hundreds of people. I gave a speech in English. My voice was strong, my words were clear, and my heart was full of pride. When I finished, everyone stood up and clapped. After the event, one of the boys who used to laugh at me came to me. He smiled and said, "Hey Sam, your English is so good now. I wish I could speak like you." I smiled and said, "You can. You just have to believe in yourself." That was the moment. I realized that the people who once laughed at me were now admiring me. And it happened because I did not give up. So my dear listener, if you ever feel weak, remember this. Weakness is not the end. It is the beginning of strength. Do not be afraid of making mistakes. Do not be ashamed of your struggles. Because every mistake you make is a step toward becoming stronger. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel inspired, then like this video and subscribe. Because every story I share is filled with love, hope, and lessons that will make you stronger and kinder every day. And remember, no matter how weak you feel today, you have the power to become strong tomorrow. Keep going. Keep believing. You are braver than you think. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. My journey of learning English continued. It was not always easy. Some days I felt tired. Some days I felt like giving up. There were moments when I sat with my books and stared at the pages, feeling frustrated. I made mistakes. I mispronounced words. I forgot sentences, but I did not stop. I remember one evening, I was sitting in my room trying to write a small essay in English. I wanted to describe my favorite place, but the words would not come easily. I kept scratching out sentences. My paper was full of lines and marks. I felt angry. I threw my pen on the table and covered my face with my hands. I whispered to myself, "Why is this so hard? Why can't I do this?" At that moment, my younger sister walked into the room. She was holding a small flower in her hand. She smiled and sat next to me. "Sam, why do you look sad?" she asked. I sighed. "I'm trying to write in English, but I keep making mistakes. I'm just not good enough." She held the little flower close to my face. "Look at this flower, Sam. Yesterday it was small, but today it is bigger. Tomorrow it will be even more beautiful. You are like this flower. You are still growing. You just need more time." Her innocent words made my heart soften. I smiled and hugged her. "Thank you," I whispered. That night, I picked up my pen again. I started writing slowly. I did not worry about making mistakes. I just kept writing. When I finished, I looked at my page. It was not perfect, but it was better than the last time. And that was enough. Slowly, my confidence grew. I started speaking more in English. I no longer hid in the back of the classroom. When the teacher asked questions, I raised my hand. Sometimes I gave the wrong answer. Sometimes I mispronounced a word. But I did not care. One day, something beautiful happened. My school announced an English storytelling competition. The students had to prepare and tell a story in front of the whole school. The moment I heard about it, my heart started beating fast. The old voice of fear came back. It whispered, "You can't do it, Sam. You are not good enough." But then, I remembered all the nights I had practiced. I remembered the tears, the hard work, and the promise I made to myself to never give up. So I signed up for the competition. For the next 2 weeks I prepared day and night. I chose a simple story with a strong message. I practiced in front of the mirror. I recorded my voice and listened carefully. I corrected my mistakes. I stood in front of my family and gave the speech again and again. The day of the competition arrived. I stood backstage, my hands cold and sweaty. I looked at the crowd. There were hundreds of students and teachers sitting in the hall. My legs felt weak. But then I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I remembered the words of my mother. "You have a chance to become strong." When my name was called, I walked onto the stage. I stood in front of the microphone. The lights were bright. The crowd was silent. For a moment I felt afraid. My hands were trembling slightly. But then I looked at the audience and smiled. And I began to speak. My voice was steady. My words were clear. I spoke with confidence. I looked into the eyes of the audience. I smiled when I delivered the funny parts. I softened my voice during the emotional moments. As I spoke, I could see people leaning forward, listening closely. Some of them smiled, some of them nodded. And when I finished, the hall was silent for a second. And then, the entire hall burst into applause. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel tears stinging my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of joy. When I walked off the stage, my teacher hugged me. "Sam, you were amazing," she said. "I'm so proud of you." A few minutes later, they announced the results. My name was called. I had won first place. I walked onto the stage to receive my award. When they handed me the certificate, my hands shook. But this time it was not because of fear. It was because of pride. I looked at the crowd and saw my mother and sister in the back row. They were both crying and clapping. After the event, one of the boys who used to laugh at me came up to me. He looked shy. "Hey, Sam," he said softly. "I just wanted to say, you were really good today." I smiled. "Thank you," I replied. And in that moment I realized that the same people who once made fun of me were now admiring me. That night, when I went home, I sat by my window and looked up at the stars. I smiled to myself. I had once felt small, weak, and ashamed, but now I felt strong, proud, and free. And I knew something for sure. No weakness can hold you back if you have the courage to keep going. So, my dear listener, if you are weak in something, whether it is English, math, sports, or anything else, do not be afraid. Do not give up. You are still growing, just like the little flower my sister showed me. Keep working, keep practicing, keep believing in yourself. One day the same thing that once made you feel weak will make you feel proud. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel inspired, then like this video and subscribe. Because every story I share is filled with love, hope, and lessons that will make you stronger and braver every day. And remember, no matter how slow your progress is, as long as you keep moving forward, you are winning. Keep going. You are braver than you think.